Quiet.
Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
can you state
She's asking a
categorically,
question. Don't
Mr.
be
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You are
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can
No,
you
I'm
give
not
us
going to
a
give you a
question?
question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir.
I'm Dr. Dave Jando. Welcome back to Dave versus the MSM. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. But there's no reason to have to wait for a new video to come out. We are available with extra shows, extra content, extra guests, extra analysis, archives to all of our shows at davejanda.com. 24/7. The Freedom Light is always on for you. Tremendous amount of free public information. Man, we have some fantastic interviews there that we've now made for the public, free. Our interview with American hero Captain Charlie Plum, who was a F-4 fighter pilot, Phantom pilot, who was shot down over North Vietnam. 5 days before he was supposed to go home, spent 2,103 days in captivity. And that interview will change your life. Why do I say that? Because that's what I've heard hundreds of times from people who have watched it. It's about adversity and how to deal with adversity. And yeah, we've been dealing with adversity right here. You know, many people believe that all of us, hundreds of millions of us, billions of us around the world, are being treated like we're POWs in our own countries. Much like Charlie was treated like a POW, not to the level of torture, obviously, Charlie endured, but still, from a psychological standpoint, Charlie talks about that. Very similar. You need to watch that interview. We also have an interview that my friend Dr. Peter McCullough and I did where he interviewed me on his platform. And it's a discussion you'll never see, hear, read, or experience in the bought-off lamestream fake media or on any other independent media source. Why? Because Pete brings his 30-plus years of clinical experience, and I bring my 30-plus years of clinical experience on the front line of healthcare delivery to the forefront, plus our histories, both Peter's and mine, in healthcare policy and in public health. It's an eye-opening presentation. It will surprise you. And it's there for you. And it's an example of what we do on the subscription side because there are untold issues that I cannot speak about on the radio or on social media platforms or in public videos. And that's what the subscription side is about. To put you months, years ahead of this globalist constructed curve that ends in a brick wall with the smashing and shattering of your remaining freedoms, liberties, future life, and our constitutional republic. And we provide you that off-ramp of freedom through davejanda.com. Today I want to speak about one of the favorite clubs, if you will, of the globalist cult: war. You see, the cult sees war as a good thing. Why? Because if you look at their playbook, it's how they've made enormous amounts of money, gotten over time more power, more control over the world. And they're the ones that never get drafted, or they're the ones who never go to war. They're the ones who start them, and they're the ones who benefit from them. Major General Smedley Butler, who was one of our nation's greatest heroes, in 1935 wrote a book, War is a Racket. And I've spoken to you about that book before, but it bears repeating in this day and age of what's happening. From Smedley Butler. War is just a racket. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of people. Only a small inside group, his words for globalist cult, deep state, New World Order crowd, criminal international banking syndicate, globalist syndicate, that's what he's talking about, knows what it's about. It's conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the masses, you and me. I wouldn't go to war again as I've done to protect some lousy investment of the bankers. There are only two things we should fight for. One is the defense of our homes, and the other is the Bill of Rights. War for any other reason is simply a racket. It may seem odd for me, a military man, to adopt such a comparison. Truthfulness compels me to do so. I spent 33 years and 4 months in an active military service as a member of this country's most agile military force, the Marine Corps. I served in all commissioned ranks from second lieutenant to major general. And during that period, I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street, and for the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I suspected I was part of a racket at the time. Now I'm sure of it. Like all the members of the military profession, I never had a thought of my own until I left the service. My mental faculties remained in suspended animation while I obeyed the orders of higher-ups. This is typical with everyone in the military service. During those years, I had, as the boys in the back room would say, a swell racket. Looking back on it, I feel that I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best Capone could do was to operate his racket in 3 districts in Illinois. I operated on 3 continents. Smedley Butler. Yeah, war is a racket. Now let's talk about the most recent racket. What's happening with NATO, with the United States, in Ukraine, in the war against Russia? From Mike Snyder, from the Economic Collapse blog. Joe Biden and his warmongering minions seem absolutely determined to drag America into World War III. When the nukes start falling, nobody will be able to say that they weren't warned. Thanks to Joe Biden and his warmongering minions, we are steamrolling toward World War III, but most Americans don't seem to care. Most of us just continue to party our lives away, but meanwhile our leaders, or whatever leaders, seem absolutely determined to drag us into an apocalyptic conflict. The Biden administration is constantly provoking China and constantly escalating the war in Ukraine. And one of these days they could cross a line that will never be able to be uncrossed. They are literally playing with fire. But they won't be the only ones that get burned if they push things too far. Recently, we learned that the Biden administration has decided to give cluster munitions to Ukraine as part of a new $800 million military assistance package. The dual-purpose improved conventional munitions, cluster bombs, are surface-to-surface warheads that explode and disperse multiple small munitions or bombs over wide areas, bringing more widespread destruction than single rounds. The rounds can be charges that penetrate armored vehicles, or they can shatter or fragment to be more dangerous for people. Some human rights groups oppose their use because of concerns that unexploded bomblets, or duds, could explode after battle, potentially injuring or killing innocent civilians. These weapons are considered to be extremely dangerous to civilians because many of them fail to go off initially and end up getting detonated by civilian activity much later, even years later. As the bomblets fall over a wide area, they can endanger non-combatants. In addition, somewhere between 10% to 40% of the munitions actually fail, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. The unexploded munitions can then be detonated by civilian activity years or even decades later. The Cluster Munitions Coalition, an activist group trying to get the weapons banned everywhere, says potentially deadly cluster submunitions still lie dormant in Laos and Vietnam, 50 years after they were dropped. As you can see, there is a reason why so many countries have banned the use of such weapons. In fact, at this point, more than 120 nations have agreed to ban them. But even though there is such an international consensus, the Biden administration is sending them to Ukraine anyway. But White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and he's a real piece of work, said the munitions were critical for Ukraine to sustain its military operations against the Russian invaders. As Schneider points out, Sullivan's a warmongering nutjob And Joe Biden does pretty much whatever Jake Sullivan tells him to do. And so when Jake Sullivan suggests provoking China again, Biden goes along with it. Zero Hedge is reporting that the U.S. will now start providing volcano vehicle-launched scatterable mine systems to Taiwan. And imagine what just happened. Our trade war with China just went to another level. If our leaders were smart, they would be trying to find a way to maintain peace. But instead, they just keep antagonizing both Russia and China, and that's just pushing them closer to one another. And needless to say, such a conflict would inevitably go nuclear. And a full-blown nuclear war would have the potential to kill billions, with a B, of people. Unfortunately, our leaders don't seem interested in peace at all. Joe Biden and his warmongering minions are playing a very dangerous game, and the fate of humanity hangs in the balance. It's a game that the globalist cult has always come up on top of, right? They support both sides in a war. And then, by the time the war is concluded, the cult, the banking families, have more money, more power, more control, and as they see it, the added benefit of millions of what they call us, the useless eaters, the 99.9% of us in the world who are law-abiding citizens, who are just trying to make a living and keep our families safe and sound and secure and provide a good future for them. They refer to us, who value what I just mentioned, as the useless eaters. The added benefit of a war is millions of us get snuffed out. That's evil. That's our enemy. In order to defeat your enemy, you have to know your enemy. Too many people are not cognizant of who our enemy is and what they're capable of. There are too few people speaking about this. If it were not for the independent media, hardly anybody would be speaking about this. But occasionally there does come about, what happens is somebody comes onto the scene who starts to speak publicly about it. One of those is RFK Jr. He came forward the other day and started speaking about reforming the intelligence agencies, in particular, that CIA, that benevolent great group. Here's what he said, quote, "What's happened is the clandestine services, the operations division of the intelligence agencies, the groups that fix elections and murder leaders and bribe and blackmail and propagandize, it has actually become the tail that wags the espionage, the information gathering division's dog. In addition, there's no oversight or accountability of its actions." When he put that forward, General Mike Flynn came forward, and here's what he said to that comment from RFK Jr. "Robert Kennedy Jr., you're correct in stating there must be necessary reforms in our various agencies. But those reforms you describe are not exactly what we need. For us to create a domestic and an international intelligence and espionage capability, we must start first with a mission that matches our Constitution and aligns with the acceptable culture that is based on values and principles that are acceptable to our American way of life. And these must then be rigorously adhered to." He goes on, "Once these are brought into alignment, then we can begin to fix the lines and the blocks of various organizational charts. Moving boxes and creating walls furthers the current ability of those elected and unelected bureaucrats who wish to usurp the Constitution and disregard the rule of law. National security is the sole responsibility of the President of the United States. That is where the buck stops. If you walk in with your current paradigm, these out-of-control agencies will laugh in your face and still cash their large black program checks and wait you out, or worse, completely undermine your presidency. It's high time for the severe government reform any future President of the United States must be prepared to face headwinds when they step in that would stop an aircraft carrier in its own wake on a dime. Lastly, regardless of where you or others stand, a future President of the United States must acknowledge that all federal intelligence and law enforcement agencies are deeply compromised, and that's not a coincidence, and it's not an accident, folks. The next American first President of the United States must move quickly to correct this problem. Trust me, there are too many foreign agents freely operating inside of our country, and they all have domestic enablers. These compromised leaders, in quotes, are why we have as many of the problems we have dating as far back as World War II. If we continue to allow foreign networks to operate with impunity because of certain domestic enablers, and these are not immediately shut down, America is doomed. There is a way out of this valley of the shadow of darkness. There are good, clear solutions to all problems. What feels impossible is simply a starting point. And that's the key, folks. Nothing is impossible. They want us to think it's impossible, that our constitutional republic is too far gone to do anything about it. No. Did George Washington and those guys who crossed the Delaware who had rags on their feet, did they just say, you know what, I'm going back inside and just sitting on the couch? You talk about insurmountable odds. In D-Day, on Normandy, on those landing crafts, when the doors fell open, the mortality and injury rates, 80%. When those landing crafts came in and the doors fell, did those heroes stay in the landing craft against the insurmountable odds, far greater than what we have today? No. No. They raced for the beach. And then they raced for the cliffs. And then they raced for the bunkers. And then they raced to extinguish fascism. Folks, they want you to think the odds are insurmountable. They want you to think that they have all the power. They don't. They really don't. What they do have is a racket. And they see their racket being exposed. That's why there's all this censorship. That's why they are continually playing the crisis card, the conflict card, the chaos card, the control card. It's slipping away from them, and they know it. They want you to stay in the landing craft. They don't want you hitting the beach. They don't want you scaling the cliffs. The odds are not insurmountable. And I believe when all is said and done, if you look at their actions, and I mentioned this before, but it bears repeating, because I don't think you hear it enough. If you look at how they're acting as though they are not powerful. They are acting as though they are panicked that their racket is coming to an end. The way we get to the end quicker, so freedom prevails, is for you to get off the couch if you haven't gotten off the couch and network this information and the information we provide on our platform to your friends and family and loved ones and coworkers and neighbors and maybe even people you don't know. Because when it comes down to it, the more people that become empowered by being educated with the facts and the data, the more people that become emboldened. And the more people that then take this truth, and it's a big bucket brigade of truth that spreads further and extinguishes the fraudulent fire of the globalist cult and their racket. I thank you for joining me today. We are available 24/7 at davejanda.com. Extra shows, extra content, extra guests, extra analysis, archives to all of our shows, commercial free. I hope you become part of our freedom family. 30 cents a day, $9 a month. For priceless content you will get no other place. I provide content no other place. I encourage you to stop on by. You will not be disappointed, but you will be educated, empowered, and enlightened. Fact. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.